to the Brick by Brick podcast, which is a podcast by the Heritage Network's Youth Forum. Today we are joined by myself, Izabella Marr,
Becca,
Darcie,
and Elizabeth.
And Elizabeth, do you want to give a little bit of an introduction since you weren't here in our first episode?
Sure. So I was born and raised in the US, and I've always really had a strong passion for history, something that my mom and I shared. She actually named me after Elizabeth Tudor, Queen of England, and so I knew the whole Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII story and could recite it pretty much by rote by the time I was 8 years old. Some parents might think that's not entirely age appropriate, but my mom disagreed, and so I knew all the dirty details. So when I was pursuing my bachelor's degree at university in the US. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and everyone told me, "Oh, just study what you love." And it's a what we called a liberal arts university in the US. There's lots of transferable skills. You can figure out what you want to do with it later. And so I decided to study history, and I just fell in love with it. Graduated in May of 2020, and that was a really crazy time for everybody. I was working as a copywriter for a local jewelry store, and I got laid off because retail, no one was shopping. And I decided, okay, maybe this is an opportunity for me to pursue working in the heritage industry. And so a tour guide position at a local historic site popped up, and I just applied to it on a whim. I didn't have any experience, but what the heck, maybe it'll work out. And they hired me. They decided to take a chance, and I just loved it. So I worked a couple of other positions like that in the US where I was living. And then I thought about, okay, well, I don't just want to do customer facing roles forever. How do I advance beyond that? I wanted to do the type of things that my supervisors were doing. I wanted to design the tours, design the exhibitions, design the interpretation of museums and sites like that. So I asked my supervisors, how did you get where you were? And it was a combination of a higher postgraduate degree in a relevant field and then experience. And I decided to do my master's degree in World Heritage at a university here in the UK because universities in the UK, there's a lot more programs in this field. And so there was a lot more opportunities, just diversity of programs. And I ended up going to Bangor University in North Wales, and I fell in love with North Wales. It's the most beautiful place I've ever lived. And I'm a recent graduate. I graduated last autumn, and I've decided to stay in the UK because I just fell in love with it. And the heritage field here is so exciting. There's so many things that are going on here that just are not happening in the US. The field is so diverse. The discourses about how should we interpret heritage and who is heritage for? Who has been left out? These were all things that I was thinking about when I was living in the US. But here, I feel like I'm meeting other people who are thinking about the same things in some really fascinating ways. And so, as a recent graduate, I'm volunteering at several local places. I'm volunteering at an archive to gain more experience, hands-on experience. And there's also a lot of really great online resources as well to get that technical knowledge. And I joined the youth forum to get more involved, learn more things, and meet like-minded people. And it's been a really great journey so far. So that's a little bit about me.
That's great. No, it's so wonderful to hear about kind of your experience and the conversations that you've been having with people. And I think the place that you're at in terms of your career is almost this is a very good episode for you to come in on because it's very relevant to you and your experience will be very relevant to the discussion that we're having as well. So I think the first kind of bit that we said that we were going to discuss is just a little bit about what are the roles in heritage, what can you do, and what is available for people to take up. And obviously we all know that there are many more things than you think there are initially. Does anyone want to jump in on anything?
I can, yeah, start. So I think kind of leading on for what you were saying is that
I think what's quite a nice thing about the heritage sector is it's a lot more diverse in terms of what's available for you to do than maybe you originally think. I know when I was at university, I wasn't really too sure what the heritage sector meant and actually kind of the broad range of roles that encompasses. I kind of thought you had to do the traditional kind of heritage route. So you like work in a museum or you work in an archive, which obviously those roles are available. But there are also kind of a lot of different roles within those, like archival or museum roles, like curating that Elizabeth was talking about and interested in, and all those different kind of interpretation sides as well. And I know kind of from the job that I now do and the more kind of consultancy side. So I didn't even know that being a heritage consultant was a thing. And I don't know how I didn't know that, but I didn't until I kind of got my internship and then started speaking to people in the sector. And I think that it's quite an interesting path that I didn't know was available in terms of roles in kind of planning, so with local authorities, heritage officers, conservation officers, and I know that's there are a lot of roles for out there and kind of that advice side and that advice piece in terms of planning and that practical side. I know there are quite a wide range of roles there.
Yeah, I think there's also, I suppose, one of the other ones that a lot of people get into is that they know that there's the museums and archive side of things, and then they know that there are like heritage sites and the tour guide side of that. But I think there's a lot of kind of even within those heritage sites, so much that's hidden that a lot of people don't realize is there. Some of that is interpretation, but some of it's conservation, being a conservator. Some of it is, I suppose, even just archaeology and that side of things as well.
I suppose leading on from that, you kind of made me think as well, those kind of traditional heritage crafts or those heritage skills, that's a huge, well, it's a sector that I think needs a bit more representation and a bit more publicity for people to go into it. And that's kind of, I suppose, a whole nother conversation of it needs more funding and I think more attention generally. But I do think, that is a viable option for people and that would be, I guess, under the kind of umbrella of heritage, but it's that really hands-on, the craft stonemasons and things like that, because without those crafts and those expertise we can't sustain and the historic buildings that we have in the best way. So they're so vital and so important. But again, something that I didn't really consider or think of when actually it would have been quite a cool career, I think.
Yeah, I see that quite a few of the larger national or regional heritage organizations and heritage funders are looking to fund more positions where people can learn those heritage craft skills. And I think it's probably one of those, there was a move away from apprenticeships
Mm,
for a while, a few years back. And now that seems to be coming back in because with those, what you'd think of as artisanal skills, it is you kind of do need to learn from someone. And so having those there is seems to be coming back in as an option rather than going to university, which I think for a lot of us was the route that was encouraged.
mm,
And that's probably why we don't think of those as viable options. I don't know about the rest of you, but for me, I only ever thought of any kind of those craft or construction skills as it was encouraged as vocational and not so much as something that you would do if you were into history or heritage. It wasn't,
definitely.
they weren't seen as particularly joined up or related to each other. And because I was somebody who knew that I was going to do something history related, nobody would have ever thought to recommend that I go into something like conservation or heritage crafts,
Mm,
despite the A levels that I did were both art and history. So for me, actually, that might have been something that I would have really enjoyed, but it just would have never occurred to me and would probably have never occurred to somebody to suggest that to me either. So, yeah, I think it's one of those that because there's the idea of those things being connected
mm.
is less in the public sphere, it's not being recommended to many people, and therefore we're having a skill shortage, and now it's that trying to work our way backwards and start encouraging people to take up those skills.
I think that's definitely right. When I wanted to go into heritage, I don't know where I got this idea from, but I just assumed that I need a master's, I need to go into university, follow this one route. And I think, like we're saying, if I maybe knew about all the different things you can do in heritage. And I think that's the beauty of it. If you want to be more hands-on and actually conserve a building, you can do that. Or if you want to be more finance or marketing, there's all these options. But I think if I was maybe doing it back, I think I would have maybe done it a little bit different now. But I mean, speaking about built heritage and going on to projects where they want to reuse an old building, there's just so many things you can do. Like I said, you go into finance or marketing or project management or be a heritage consultant or right down to maybe working with the actual building materials.
There's also things like architecture and,
Yeah.
you know, that can be specifically heritage. And I think there's maybe another misconception in that a lot of people that get into heritage get into it because they love history. But there are so many other things that it's almost like heritage is a lens that you can put over any other job. So you can pick any job that you want and then go, well, can I make it heritage? And the answer most of the time seems to be yes,
Yeah,
which
I
I
think
really enjoy about it. I think that's amazing.
definitely. I think because heritage is one of those. It is literally all around us, so it is everywhere. So even kind of doing cultural studies or community engagement, the often communities are so rooted in their heritage, and they really see their specific heritage, which is unique to their place, as being a driver for place identity and community. And doing something kind of community roles where you're getting the feel of what a community wants often can also traverse into the heritage sector because people kind of say, oh, I really like our old buildings or our built heritage. So they really do intertwine in lots of different ways. And kind of as we were saying, you don't necessarily either have to go to a traditional heritage route to interact with heritage, I think, in your job or day to day.
Absolutely. I also think there's more and more there's focus on other uses of heritage as well. So like heritage and culture and how those interact. And I know that a lot of the built heritage that is being reused or rescued or renovated is being made into things like events venues or cultural arts centres or heritage hubs and things like that. And so you can be almost like an events manager and also be involved in heritage. And the same with things like well-being. There's a lot of kind of research and practice that's coming around now that I'm seeing of heritage being a place for people to work on their well-being. I think especially during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, people realized the heritage that was around them and how much interacting with it and visiting it can contribute towards their well-being. Often it's in a beautiful setting, whether that be a natural setting or a built heritage setting. And so I think increasingly that's a path that you can take in heritage as well, and a role that you can sit in that's both in the heritage sector and kind of outside of it as well.
Definitely. And I also think things like funding, so kind of how you fund projects, that's a really important role. So kind of having a background in kind of funding, how you get, especially if it's a charity that's taking a charitable trust or something, kind of taking over a building. Historic buildings are, you need a lot of money. And so how grant funding, how does that work? So being someone who can provide that information to groups is also quite a key role, and I think is quite integral to heritage projects as well. So that's definitely an avenue that I did a bit of volunteering for in the past and found really interesting, about all the different ways you can get grants and funding and how to kind of sort that all out, because it's so integral and it's a completely different world that I don't know about but links so nicely to heritage.
Absolutely. And in terms of funding as well, you've got things like there's a focus from a lot of funders now as well for heritage sites or buildings to be sustainable in their practice, in what they do once the building is ready to be used. What is it used for, and can it kind of run itself and fund itself? So there's almost like business in heritage as well. That not almost is, there is business in heritage, and kind of having that, being like an operations manager and a business manager within a heritage site or within a heritage organization is very much a thing. And so, yeah, that again, that kind of finance side of things, very much needed within heritage, and another big focus that a lot of organizations have.
Going off of what you said on that, thinking back to my time working at heritage sites in America, retail and merchandising is also a huge part of historic sites. And so any skills to do with e-commerce, but also, merchandising, physical brick and mortar stores, on-site shops, and also doing it in a way that is financially viable and helps you fund the operations of the site, but is also ethical and respectful, especially in places with dissonant heritage. You don't want to seem like you're turning it into a cash cow. And so a lot of really business savvy people end up working at heritage sites when maybe they didn't think that was where their path was going to take them.
I'm wondering if we should talk a little bit about, so there are all of these roles that exist within heritage or that are related to heritage, but where do you find them, and how do you look for them, I suppose, as well?
I guess there's the ones that people probably are already looking at, your classic kind of job searches online. I know Guardian jobs, they do a lot of kind of charity-based heritage jobs, they advertise a lot. But I would say probably since working in the sector and kind of going to more events and things, I would say one of the best things to do, especially if as like a new graduate, even though it's probably really daunting and I definitely would have been kind of nervous to do it, is just to try and go to as many events as possible. So kind of events where you have the possibility to network, because even if you don't do any networking and you just kind of hear from speakers, you can hear about the roles that are out there and what people do and what people kind of contribute to the sector. And then there's people there you can talk to and say, oh, I'm newly graduated, I'm discovering what the heritage sector is all about, what's involved, and you've kind of got your pick of the bunch of a really great range of people in one room. So I'd say that's probably quite a good kind of looking for what types of roles are available, but also people's experiences of how they got into that role. Because I think I always thought it was meant to be, you leave uni and then you get the role that you were trained for or whatever. But actually, speaking to a lot of people, it's no, they went here and then they went there, and that all then joins into them being good for the role they are in currently. So I think it's more, yeah, I wish I did that a bit earlier on, kind of going to events. You can find them online, or like LinkedIn is really good, like Historic England do events. Loads of kind of places do kind of networking events, and often they're free as well, which is really good. You can just kind of turn up and kind of listen to some speakers and then network afterwards. So doing something like that, I think, is really useful and something, yeah, I definitely would encourage.
And I think as well, kind of related to what you were saying there and what Elizabeth was saying earlier as well, about if you are, so if you hadn't graduated from uni, but if you were looking to get into heritage and maybe you were volunteering, going to like local places where there is maybe a heritage site or a museum, and finding out from the people that work or volunteer there what they do and kind of what they need to, how they've gotten to where they are. Say you maybe weren't so confident to go to a networking event necessarily. You can still be asking people questions and interacting with those who are engaging with heritage locally to you to find out a little bit more and understand the sector a little bit more as well. You can find out a lot about the roles within the sector without having to put yourself out there too much. As far as my experience has gone, people are quite happy to talk about what they do and how they got there. And most people in the heritage sector are very passionate about what they do. They have usually gotten involved because they enjoy what they are doing and enjoy the heritage side of it. And so are usually quite happy to chat to you about what they've done, how they've gotten there. And I think it's a great piece of advice to just talk to as many people as you can. And I think even since getting my first roles in the sector, I've been trying to employ that more and more and just talk to as many people as I can, build up an idea of, what is out there and how can I be involved in it? And if I'm not, then how can I promote it to other people? And I guess that's part of my current role, is that I get to try and encourage people into areas that they maybe hadn't heard of before, which is great. And I feel like I'm still hearing about roles even 2 years into being with Heritage Network. I still occasionally hear about a role that I've never heard of before and that is doing something either incredibly niche or just so different from what I had originally assumed heritage was, that I find it fascinating. And I think sometimes you don't know where all the roles are until you start looking. And it's like you start pulling on a piece of string and then the ball of string unravels and you've suddenly got string everywhere. And it's like, I think it's similar with looking at heritage jobs. It can be like, oh, you go down one and you look at the skills that are involved and then you go, oh, well, what's that? And how do I find that? And you end up suddenly you've heard about somebody that, like, I mean, maybe it's not the most niche, but somebody that thatches roofs or somebody that makes a very specific thing for a very specific reason, like clay roof tiles that are very specifically for a type of heritage building. And you're like, well, somebody has to make them, I suppose. And that's really cool. And if you're really into doing that and working with clay, why would you not want to?
No, I definitely agree. I think also while you're speaking to people within the sector, you never know what opportunities might come in the pipeline. I know I've had placements and had people messaging me saying, "Oh, this job is opening up," even if it's not the right context for me. And I think that's such a lovely thing that this sector is really good for. And I think also maybe when you first graduate, it can be very overwhelming and, getting that first job. And I just think sometimes it's good to speak to someone and say, I'm interested in this and this. And they have the wealth of knowledge to kind of maybe push you in the right direction or have another connection with someone else. I mean, speaking about my experience looking for jobs, what really helped online, there was this heritage guide and it comes out, I believe, every year. And it was so much detail in if you want to work in museums or archives or libraries or built heritage. And within that, they just have loads of links of where to look. I mean, a good one at the top of my head that I used a lot was the University of Leicester. They were very up to date and all sorts. And again, that was good for me. Like, I didn't even know I could be like a paper conservator or anything like that. Things you just don't heard of. But it's good to have that awareness anyway. And also LinkedIn. It's good just to generally keep updated to see, follow the big, or maybe not the big companies or organizations, but just to show what they're doing, if they're having funding or what roles they're updating. And even if you want to inspire yourself, like, I want to get there, but maybe not just yet, it's like, what do I need to do?
Definitely. I think LinkedIn as well is such a good one. Like you can get job alerts as well through LinkedIn, which when I was looking were really useful because I applied for quite a few, I think through from seeing them on LinkedIn and I hadn't seen them anywhere else. But also I think LinkedIn as a platform is quite useful if you kind of follow people who do jobs that you might be interested in, then they post about, what they're up to, what's going on, kind of as you were saying, and it just gives you more of an insight. And also, I guess if you feel kind of comfortable doing it, posting on LinkedIn yourself and saying, these are my interests, this is what I'm interested in, maybe this is what I'm volunteering in, these are my thoughts, this is kind of my stance, and people will engage with it. And then, you never know what might come as a result. You might find some really interesting conversations, meet some new people, and then, X many months down the line, it could result in an opportunity. You just don't know. So I think definitely utilizing those kind of online platforms are really useful.
Absolutely. It kind of goes back to that networking thing, doesn't it? And just people seeing your face or seeing your name and you interacting with them usually will lead to something, an opportunity, or you'll hear about an event and then you'll go to that event and then you'll hear about an opportunity there. And just it's getting your name and your face into the sector so that you have those interactions and are able to then make the most of any opportunities that do come your way. I do also want to highlight, Becca, just the two resources that you mentioned there, the Leicester University's Jobs Desk, which is great for finding heritage jobs, and the Built Environment Forum Scotland Heritage Guide, which they release every year. Both great resources. The Heritage Guide has a whole host of the different areas of heritage that you might get into, as well as the different platforms that you might find those jobs on, which can be really useful as a kind of catch-all, and you can work your way through. There's probably a whole glossary of links now in the back of that document that you can click through them all and go, oh, maybe I want to do something there, maybe not. I do also have to plug Heritage Network has a jobs page, and we post. So Heritage Network is a network for kind of the smaller community organisations that engage with usually built heritage, but can be places, landscapes and things as well. And our members post their own jobs, so jobs that they're doing, which are usually on a much smaller community level. So lots of people have heard of the larger organisations and trusts, things like the National Trust, but those can be very competitive and very hard to get jobs in, whereas some of the smaller heritage organisations, heritage trusts, are usually also looking for similar jobs and maybe get less applicants. They're also usually really interesting, very place specific, and can offer quite a lot of very good experience. And they're usually really friendly little teams. So it's quite nice to get that kind of engagement with smaller community heritage. And some of those jobs are available on the Heritage Network website. So if you want to look there, you can too. What experience do you need and how do you get it? Which I suppose is quite a broad question for what can be some quite specific jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of experience, as you say, it's very specific to potentially what you might want to go into. But I think what underpins all of them is just a kind of willingness to learn and also genuine enthusiasm. I think if you can kind of prove that you are genuinely really interested about whatever it is that you want to go into, and that you are up to date with kind of what's going on in that part of the sector, so you're reading about current things that are going on, any new kind of advice being published, or it's that active interest, I think, which if people can pick up on that, they'll kind of go, well, you've got that, so we can then with your skills base kind of mold you or anything into what kind of is needed for the role. So I think, if thinking about it as applying for jobs, demonstrating on your CV that you have an interest in that area, and a lot of the time that does come from volunteering, but not always, or kind of being involved in projects, or even kind of making or leading your own kind of project if you're interested in like local history or local community engagement, doing something like that yourself for your local community. I know that goes a long way, I think, on kind of applications, and it shows genuine kind of passion for it.
I think as well, a lot of the time, I mean, again, it's maybe different depending on the roles that you're going for, but part of the reason why I think we all advocate for maybe networking a little bit is that heritage is, run by and organized through people. And so a lot of it is to do with people skills and those soft skills that are very transferable. So you can build up a skill set that's specific to the role that you want. But if you're not talking to people that are maybe in those roles, or if you aren't able to communicate as effectively as you might want to, it can be very hard to convey that you have those skills. And so it doesn't, you don't have to be the most effective or the best communicator. I think, again, there's that level of having some enthusiasm and a willingness to try, but showing that you want to be involved, and communicating that to people. is a very important part of, I suppose, not just heritage, but any kind of job hunt, really, isn't it? It's being able to talk to people about what you're looking for and what you can do. And even if you don't have maybe the skills that they're looking for, being able to communicate that you would be willing to try, or that you can maybe think about the skills that you do have in a way of fitting them into the realm of skills that they might need, and just, yeah, having that kind of understanding of where you want to go and how you might get there, and being able to communicate that to somebody does go a long way.
Volunteering, obviously, is also a really big part of it. That's probably the most common piece of advice that people say to young people in the sector. You've just graduated. They say, oh, well, volunteer to help gain that experience, volunteer to help gain that experience. Volunteering, though, that's a very big umbrella term, and it can mean a lot of different things. And often, a lot of museums and heritage sites, they really depend on volunteers for a variety of different kinds of labor and activities. And because, they're grateful to you because you're volunteering your time, they'll kind of let you do whatever you want to do, which is great because you get to decide. But if you don't really know what specific skills you need or want to gain, then you can sometimes end up doing things that later you realize months down the line, oh, I would have been better served if I had known more specifically what I wanted to get out of that. And that's also really important for people who maybe they don't have a ton of time. I think it's the situation for a lot of young people where they want to enter into this field, but they also need income to be financially stable. And so they'll have to take a job doing something else. And so that might limit the time that they have to volunteer. And so it's important that you maximize the time you do have. I wish I had figured this out 6 months ago, and I did not start doing this until very recently. But I looked up the job advertisements for jobs that I would like to have that I think, okay, I'm almost qualified to be a really good candidate for this job. What is missing for me? And I looked down on the person specification and the different qualifications that they wanted in the person. And I looked for gaps in my own CV and my own work history and what those specific skills were. And many of them I had never heard of. And so I did a little Google, I found out what they were, and then I started looking for volunteer opportunities specifically through that lens. Like, okay, if I want to work in a museum doing behind the scenes stuff, then I need more hands-on experience working with collections, working with exhibition design. And so this way, when you contact places asking if they have room for any more volunteers, you can ask them very specifically if they have availability for you to do the specific activities or specific skills that you'd feel would be most beneficial to you. And this way, if you know going in sort of what you're looking for, and obviously there are some things you don't know what you don't know until you get in there and start learning it, and then you realize all sort of the web of skills and how it all connects. But it allows you to be a bit more targeted in your approach, and it allows you to really maximize the use of your time. And in my experience, most people at these sites, heritage people, are very passionate. They want more people to get involved. And so if you come to them and say, hey, I really want to do this thing, if there's any possible way that they can help you do what you really want to do and what you're passionate about, they'll usually try to make it happen.
I think that's a really good point. I think it's definitely, I think, well, a good piece of advice that I got when I was kind of looking for jobs and in that volunteering phase is volunteering is a two-way street. You have to make sure it works for you because, as you said, they're getting free labor from you. So using it in that really targeted way was something that I hadn't actually thought about before, but yeah, is one of the best pieces of advice I think that you can give, that you need to fill in those gaps, which are the skills you don't have, by looking for volunteering opportunities, which will fill those kind of gaps. And I think, yeah, completely echo what you were saying.
It's a great point in that the gaps that you have, those skills, and they're usually relatively specific skills that you're looking for, that you will need to gain through volunteering in those things. The other skills that you might need for a job, you can get in other places. So if you do have to be working a different job, be it, a customer service job or a retail job, there are a lot of skills that you can build up that will contribute towards something in heritage in those jobs that kind of help as transferable skills. So like people, again, those soft skills, people skills, dealing with customers, organizational, the kind of the skills that you might need for any job, but you don't need to build up through volunteering. You can get in other places, and then maximizing the time that you are giving away for free to make sure that it is also benefiting where you want to go and what you want to do is such yeah, a key idea. And I think understanding how the other skills then that you develop in, say, a paid job can contribute to what you're doing helps you also, I suppose, market yourself as somebody with many skills. So the just understanding what the phrasing that's used around the skills that you might build, those soft skills, the communication, that thing, and how they then contribute into the overall picture of heritage with then whatever skills that you want to gain through volunteering really helps to sell yourself as a package for whichever job you're looking for. So Elizabeth, it was really good advice about kind of just looking at those person specifications and being like, okay, well, I have these other skills through my job or things that I've done previously. Understanding where your gaps are and how you can make the most of them will really help. And I think it's also that thing of people don't always sell themselves in the way that they could. I think people can be quite self-deprecating and maybe go, oh, well, I don't know that I 100% have enough experience in that. But if you do have some experience in it, you can say that and you are allowed to talk about that in applications and things. And it will become very apparent if the level to which you have those skills is not enough. In interview, usually they'll ask you a question and you'll either be able to fully answer it or you won't. And that's fine. That's also a skill that you learn as interviewing and understanding how you communicate the skills that you do have and how to talk about them to people.
Yeah, I think it is. I think especially like you said, Izzy, with soft skills, maybe it's something that I do personally, like you overlook skills like communicating, team working, time management. And that's skills that you got from maybe you're at university or like a customer facing job, like you said. But I do believe, knowledge which may stop you from applying to a job because you think, oh, I don't have that experience in that particular job. But I do believe that does come like within time and it can be built upon. But those soft skills are quite fundamental. Maybe not in all jobs in heritage, but you are going to be speaking to people, working in a team, you have to manage your own time. So I think that is something really important. And I think with volunteering as well, I know we said it in the last podcast, but obviously it is a privilege and it is not manageable for everyone to be doing it. And I think definitely making sure you're targeting yourself with volunteering in the sense, I know that, I know I've already said it, but with LinkedIn, keeping up to date, maybe what projects are happening in your local area. And there might be one that might interest you and you could email them that, oh, this sounds fun. And you could go into that. So I think it is, instead of going into a voluntary role, and I've had friends done it before where they spent hours and days volunteering maybe at a museum and they said they just didn't learn a lot and they had to quit, and time is money and you want to make sure it is targeted.
One sort of thing I would say, just advice for how to stay sane and keep yourself in a good headspace when you are volunteering, when you are applying, and you're in that awkward position of, I have to gain these skills that I don't feel like I fully have, but then I also have to sell myself. And it's like, how do you have the self-confidence? How do you believe in yourself? So, do all the good mental health things, do affirmations, take baths, whatever works for you. Something that I've found really helpful is doing sort of small doses of vulnerability and putting myself out there more than just applying for jobs, because if all you ever do is apply for jobs to people you've never met, and then you just keep getting rejection after rejection after rejection, it really takes a toll on you. But if you do small little vulnerabilities where you're trying something new, like you join a group, like for example, the youth forum at the Heritage Network, and you join a podcast for the first time, or maybe you start posting on social media in a different way, or you start volunteering at a new place, or you go to an event that you've never been to before, you interact with new and different people. You will get some kind of positive feedback through connecting with people over a shared passion. And the heritage sector is filled with people who are passionate about this, and they respond to other people who also have that passion. So I would encourage everybody who's in the very awkward, somewhat nerve-wracking place of looking for their first job after university, who are volunteering, who are trying to get their foot in the door, do those small literal vulnerabilities that are more likely to have positive feedback, and also all the other benefits that we've mentioned, gaining experience, networking. Every time you do it, you will feel braver, and it'll make, the rejections that do come, it'll make it seem like less of an avalanche and more of just a little snowfall, like a bunny hill, if we're going with snow metaphors.
Yeah, I think you're really right there. I think that's another great piece of advice is that just understand that the job search and applying for jobs it can be very disheartening, especially if you're getting a lot of rejections, which, there are some anecdotal statistics, that you can apply for 100 jobs and you maybe get to interview for like a few of them. And I think that's more of a general one. I don't know what the stats are for heritage specifically. I don't know if it's better or worse than that, but I think it is, and the youth forum specifically, I think of for this, but that it's a really good place for that kind of peer support. And you maybe don't feel so much of the, not imposter syndrome, but you don't feel as though you're as out of place as you might at a heritage, like a professional heritage networking event. It is obviously all online, but there's a lot of people in the same boat, and it's really nice to be able to see other people dealing with the same struggles and kind of understanding where you're coming from. And it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes in the Discord group, in the kind of off-topic things, people will talk about what they're trying to do and the jobs that they're trying to get and where they've been. And it might happen sometimes youth forum meetings occasionally get a bit tangential and people have a little bit of a venting session, which I think actually can be quite cathartic and can be really nice. And despite the fact that we're a UK-wide forum, can feel like you're building a connection with other people who are also trying to get into the sector and do have those same passions, but you're getting feedback that isn't just a very cold, like rejection notification or email. You're getting okay, we're all trying and we're all building up our skills and, we will get somewhere for it, but right now it's not happening, but that's okay because it's not just me in this boat. Whereas I think when you're applying for those jobs, and only getting kind of a cold rejection on a screen, it can feel very lonely and it can feel very disheartening. And having that, putting yourself out there in a way that allows you to connect with other people, even if you're all connecting over the fact that you maybe didn't get a job, does really help with the process. And I think builds a level of resilience and also then allows you to build connections with people who might also be going into different but also heritage roles. So you've almost already got a network by the time you get there, which I think, and I'm hoping that it will overall build kind of a generation of quite resilient people within the heritage sector who have gone into quite a competitive marketplace, but built connections and kind of friends, and their experience isn't just done alone, it's done as a group, which is very nice. I found it very useful, even as somebody that's been in my first role, like having that peer support and the interaction with other people and hearing about their interests and what they're going into and the experiences that they've had along the way. And then in some capacities, I really like it because I'm able, through my job, to offer like support and actually some of the activity that's involved with that, which is amazing. But just seeing what other people are even able and capable to do through the forum and the connections and the friendships that they build is really lovely.
all of us are either several months or in different ways, several years out from graduating. What advice would we give if there was one number one piece of advice?
I'll go first. It's going to be a reiteration, I think, of something I said earlier, but I think if I were to give kind of one piece of advice for someone who, let's say, has just left uni or left kind of what they've been doing and they want to embark into the heritage sector, I would say, and this is upon reflection, something that I wish I did at the beginning, though I know it's hard, is to put yourself out there. It's one thing that I regret not doing earlier because each time you put yourself out there and you go to events and you speak to people, it gets easier. And I always thought people were lying to me when they told me that, but they're not. It's true. I hate to admit it, but it is true. And I have found the more I speak to people, the more I grow in confidence and I learn more, and you do get opportunities through speaking to people. That is how I got my job. So it works. And also as we've been saying, people are so friendly and people like to chat and they want to share their experience. So, people aren't going to turn you away. So I think, yeah, just having the confidence in yourself and kind of going, look, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to find what I want. I'm going to speak to people and be really open to what that looks like and kind of what that leads to.
My advice would be embrace the learning aspect of this part of the journey. The heritage field is one that really, really sort of relies on learning. No matter how old you get or how long you've been a career, you could be top of your field in a lot of ways. There's always something new to learn about being in the job that you have, but also just the heritage sector itself. It's all about history, uncovering new things, looking at the past in a different way. And while, the just got out of uni looking for jobs phase in so many ways is really, really hard and it's not fun, you learn so much about yourself and about the sector and just kind of about life more generally. And I think the things that you learn that are sometimes hard to put into words these are lessons that are going to be so important for you for the rest of your professional life. This time when you're young and you're just starting out, it's made for learning, and embrace that. Learn all the things that there are to learn, explore everything there is to explore, and that's how you're probably going to find your way.
I think my advice would be, if I was telling myself, it would probably just take your time. In a sense, you don't need to be at a certain position at a certain time, or, compare yourself to maybe your other peers who graduated and they've got jobs and you haven't. You're on your own journey, and it's so easier said than done and maybe a bit cliche. But I just think it just really helps, like speaking to people and, finding, like the forum, people who are interested in heritage, your own little community that you can talk about things and de-stress. And I think, yeah, that would be my main advice. Just take your time and just try not to overthink, and everything will plan out. It may not feel like it, but it will in the end.
And I think that my advice for anyone kind of entering into the heritage sector or the job market is, where you have the capacity to, say yes to things that you maybe aren't sure are relevant. Say yes to events that you think maybe don't quite align with what you want to do, because you will meet some people that might be relevant to you or might know more about a part of the sector that you don't know about, but then you find very interesting. You might pick up a new skill that ends up leading you down a completely different rabbit hole that you really love. And you might find something that you didn't expect but end up really enjoying. And that's a really fun kind of discovery part of being where you are. Taking the opportunities that come your way where you can is really important. And they don't always feel like they're the most relevant, but they can be really, some of those can be the most fulfilling ones, because it's an unexpected joy that you get to develop a new skill or meet a new person or learn a new thing. And I think it's very important to in being able to say yes to things where you can. It's almost allowing yourself to not take it too seriously, in that you're giving yourself the space to kind of have fun and learn new things and take the opportunities that are available to you, rather than saying that you have to stick very rigidly to one path. And I think that that's a really important lesson, both within trying to find a job and heritage and probably life more generally. But I think it's a good piece of advice nonetheless for that. So thanks for joining us. This has been an episode of Brick by Brick, a podcast by the Heritage Network's Youth Forum. I've been Izabella.
I've been Becca.
I've been Darcie.
And I've been Elizabeth.
And thank you for joining us.